I'm in before the 5-minute rule, so hopefully folks didn't bail out after I didn't show up for the first 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Welcome to the Afternoon Idle. I'm Andrew. I'm a certified mindfulness meditation coach in the Unified Mindfulness System. You can find out more about at unifiedmindfulness.com. I am a lot of different things, but what I am not is a licensed mental health professional, therapist, etc. Let's see. So yesterday we did this switcheroo, like the sort of Sadie Hawkins format for our contrast sit. So if you haven't been here before, we normally do a 15-minute meditation where we do a little bit of settling in at the beginning, and then about a 50-50 split between a something technique, which rotates, and sort of the technique of no technique, which is, at least in the Unified Mindfulness System, referred to as do nothing. The do there is meant sort of in a punish sort of way, so pun-ish, not to like corporally punish you, but in a pun-like way of the idea that there's nothing to do would be another way to put it. So it's more being, I guess, maybe, or the enjoying the creatureliness of being in a human body, I think is how Jeff Warren will say it at times. And that's that do nothing part is the shorthand form that Shinzen Young had given to that technique. So it's much like the way that folks in the Soto Zen practice Shikantaza, which means like a sort of emphatic just this or just sitting. Very similar to also with the way that Rinzai Zen. And then there are some Tibetan forms that I'm not as familiar with, but my understanding is they're more of this sort of unmeditation, or the sort of holy laziness that you'll find with people that are teaching sort of non-dual techniques. So yeah, so today we're going to do Here Gone as our do something part, and then we'll finish up with do nothing again. And then probably next Thursday we'll switch it up again, and see about this idea of going from the beginning to sort of dropping into doing nothing, and then have a technique at the end. So, and then if you are interested in these sort of sequence, sort of circuit sits, you can do this with your favorite timer. Angie had pointed out that there's an option to do it on Calm. I often use the Insight timer for this, and you can do interval bells to kind of mark like a 5 minutes of concentration practice, a 5 minutes of loving kindness, etc. So thank you to Sarah and Angie for tuning in, and to the other two, so for 3 people, I guess there's someone pops in and out occasionally there. So thank you for joining. And yeah, before we do anything else, I'll just I'll do a little like mini recap on the technique. But if you have any questions, you can ask those in the chat. I'll do my best to respond. So we're gonna, for the something part where we'll have a technique, we're going to be using a noting technique. And so you likely are familiar with noting. It's this idea of brief concentration. So we're sort of noting, or we're noting where our attention is within a given range of experience. So in the Unified Mindfulness System, the way we meet reality is through these abstractions of 3 categories, to allow us to sort of sort what's going on in our sensory experience into those categories. For today, we're just going to be looking at here. So here would be both mental talk and sounds around you. And so that is that's the category that our focus range will be. So if your attention is pulled away from that, not a big deal, but being aware that our attention is sort of out of bounds, and then kindly bringing our attention back, and knowing that our attention will get pulled away, and kindly bringing it back. So when we notice that our attention is within here, We can use the label, which is a sort of skillful use of mental talk, to say here as a way to note our attention at that given point. And if we notice activation has dropped completely off, so there was activation and then there's not any activation, we can label the realization or being aware of that as gone. So we can think about that any sensory experience is going to have some sort of arising. So there will be a new thing, a new impression in the sensory space, and then it'll drop off. And there'll be a new impression, and it'll drop off. And so what we're looking at the dropping off parts, the gones. I think it's in the Lion's Roar, but maybe Tricycle. Shinzen Young wrote probably 4 years ago, maybe more, about if he had only one technique to teach someone, he would teach them just noting gone, or just noting these disappearances of sensory activity. So not for everybody. So again, we're trying it out. We're playing around with it, experimenting, and looking at sort of the wide world beyond breath practice and body scans, things like that. So here gone is our technique, and then our do nothing technique will be what most people are familiar with, probably from if you've sat in on a do nothing project. But the idea in a do nothing sit is that we let whatever happens happen. We drop our intentions to control or orchestrate or direct or conduct where we're focusing. And we just are in this sort of neutral position where we're not adding to anything, but we're not subtracting. So we're just in essence sort of a receive or observe mode, which can be uncomfortable if your brain is going on and on and on about whether or not you did this or that or whatever. So that is part of the equanimity piece. So you're not pushing and pulling on what's going on. All right. We'll invite the bell. Good to have you, Brooke. Thank you, Angie and Sarah, for tuning in. So as we begin, I invite you to take a posture that is one that will help you be both relaxed and alert. The spine and torso are upright, and the spine is long, sort of a dignified, maybe even majestic quality to the way you're sitting. And seeing if your ideally shoulders are, if you're sitting in a chair on a cushion, your shoulders are over your hips, your nose is aligned with your navel. And then just checking in to see if there's any tension in the body. And sometimes, but not always, if we notice the tension will release. And if the tension remains, it's our first opportunity to bring a quality or stance of no big deal to that. So the body wants to be tense there, and that's okay. We'll allow that. And then before we begin our here gone technique, just 3 to 5 breaths in through the nose and out through the nose. If you are congested, you can mimic the qualities of how the nose breathing or nasal breathing will slow down your breath if you purse your lips, sometimes referred to as straw breathing. That we're looking for is slow and low, like the Beastie Boys suggested so long ago. And if we can accentuate that exhale and lengthen it a bit, it helps us to settle into the posture, gets us even kind of low into the posture. So this is a waypoint, just this, or just sitting kind of quality, very bare bones, and it's a completely valid technique for the entire path. So you want to stay here, totally cool. You want to come back to here, totally fine as well. And to begin with, here gone. My prompts can be activation for what's going on in here. And so as I offer these different prompts and invitations, you can note them, soak your attention in, and optionally label here. Or you can focus on the abrupt gaps between the noises that I'm making and note them gone. So explore here gone. So often when we choose a technique or a category, we end up getting activation in the other categories. So you may get a lot of mental imagery now that we've picked here as our category. Just noticing that. Very patient and a quantumous nod, and bringing the attention back to here. Or you may have a persistent itch or something in the feel category. So just knowing that that's common hopefully is a bit comforting. And continue to explore here gone. As you focus on the sounds around you, you may be more drawn towards sounds that seemingly are consistent or are sort of ever present. So I'm drawn to the sound of the fan in my laptop, or maybe it's the sound of air blown through a vent. So in noticing, the refrigerator stopped, that would be an example of gone, or the heater turned off. Whatever may interest you in that space is totally fine. Good. So for some, using sounds as an object of focus is innately restful, or at least can offer a little bit of a settling. So if that's the case, then see if you can bring that quality into the remainder of our sit as we drop the technique and allow whatever happens to happen, exploring do nothing. So it's worth mentioning that you may have a little bit of agitation around not doing anything, or what may come up or what may be alive for you is this like, well, am I doing this right? So those are really common things to come up when you start to drop the techniques altogether. So like distant clouds, it's more about noticing that coming up and then not adding on to it, and not trying to sort of get rid of or remove that from what's going on as well. So this is the equanimity piece, the inner smoothness muscle. We're not pushing on our experience. We're not pulling or holding on to anything in the experience. We are this like middle option. So if your eyes have been closed, I invite you to open them and connect to your surroundings. And if you have questions, I'll do my best to offer some responses. If you have reports, I'm always interested in hearing how sits were, or if anything came up, or how it was in general. So always remember that the sit could be a pleasant experience, a not pleasant experience, both or neither. So those are all valid possibilities. Or put another way, I empower you to not like the sit if that's what happened. You're very welcome, Sarah. So I think at least 3 of you are normal do nothing project folks, and so I think today it'll go out, but I'm guest hosting on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that. So we're gonna play around with reframing what's one of the aspects that's in the Eightfold Path in Buddhism, the idea of taking right effort and reframing it as right laziness. So cool, Angie. So have you done the Gone, this noticing for or noting Gone before? Or is this the first time? Curious about that. So there was a time, and maybe I've been 5 years ago, where Shinzen was very keen on Gone, and yeah, okay. So Angie's mentioning Shinzen Young's book, The Science of Enlightenment. He talks a fair bit about Gone, and so we can sort of think about noting practice in general is, in essence, you're likely noting the arising of some new sensory experience. And so if you ever do the home practice program with Shinzen, sometimes either him or he has visiting teachers, folks that are filling in for him. They'll often do techniques that are special exercises, but they're sort of still under the umbrella of unified mindfulness, around the arising of a sensory experience and then the passing of the sensory experience, or the new aspect, the new side of a Gone. And so it's interesting to begin to sort of see that, because in essence it almost reinforces in the present moment the impermanence of something. So it's really common for us when we're paying attention often to sort of not see the gaps. So I think of Gone as beginning to see the negative space in a visual design. So a letter in a book or on a screen or whatever is shaped as much by the things around it as it is by the ink or the pixels that are turned on for it. And so there's this yin yang quality to the design of things like that poster. And so it's interesting to see how much that shaping quality is. We tend to look at what make the ink that's been laid down that makes the form of the letter. And I think it's interesting to look at Gone as a way to see that sort of the shape, that almost negative space sort of aspect. Yeah, Shinzen does bring it up as the derivatives. I was a C calculus student, so I do. At least if I remember correctly, the derivatives are, we're looking at change over time, I believe. So the thing with Here Gone, or at least why I like it, is if you are ever in meetings that you don't necessarily want to be in, which as a software professional is sometimes many, you can do Here Gone with the meeting that you are not super excited about being in. And it's a way to sort of keep you engaged in that meeting without sort of your mind wandering off. At the same time, I'm a big fan of Nixon, or this idea of like deliciously not doing anything and letting the mind wander. And so yeah. So, but anyway, here gone is something that I will often do in interactions. And in that situation, I'm really just looking for the gons in gaps in someone's speech. Oh, thank you, Brooke. Nice. Well, thank you for that. Uh, it is it is interesting. I don't know if I emphasize this a lot or enough, but just the sort of fact that the nervous system is different every day, or you're going to have things that are available and not available. And so you'll hear some mindfulness teachers. Shinzen's way of talking about this is windows as in opportunities, and walls are things that are obstacles and blocking you. I think we've talked a bit about ION in the past. So that's this acronym ION. So interest is the first, opportunity is the O, and then N is the necessity part. And so you know, like that's another way of looking at, you know, kind of how what is alive for me today, or what's available. And playing around with ION is a one way, at least in sort of Shinzen speak, of beginning to practice that idea that Jeff Warren likes to talk about, is of being a mind body DJ, being able to pair your practices with what's needed, like what your nervous system needs at that time. So anyway, just something to emphasize. Thank you so much for spending a half hour with me, and I really appreciate it. I will see folks. Well, I'll see you at the same bat time, same bat channel next Monday. But then I will also see those that are Do Nothing Project regulars on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern.